So now I invite you to listen to the following words of Scripture, out of place for the lectionary police that is among us. But I thought in my last 2 Sundays I can kind of do what I want to do, so bear with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane today. A reading from Matthew 26. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I'm deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." On March 15th, 1998, how many times during this past weeks I've come back to this moment? And don't worry, I'm not going to show you the picture of myself at Houston Airport. But that was the day I arrived in Houston at the age of 27 for a year-long internship. That moment was a watershed moment in my life. I left the shores of South Africa as it faced the brutality of apartheid and lived into its newfound freedom, engaging in the arduous work of nurturing a democracy in its infancy. However, while I was excited to arrive in the land of equality, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I left my homeland with a deep sense of loss and grief. See, my vocational call had been cradled in the flourishing of all people. The distress I felt at that time wasn't just about leaving South Africa, my homeland, but in leaving behind my call to ministry, the opportunity to contribute to the collective healing of wounds caused by injustice. Erroneously, I thought I'd left that call behind, as I assumed that the United States of America had already attained basic human rights for all people. 2 epical events happened that year of 1998, which challenged and grieved me profoundly. Yet at the time, I could not fully unpack the significance of those events. The first one, on June 7th, 1998, James Burr Jr., a black American man, was lynched by 3 avowed white supremacists in Jasper, Texas. The second, on the night of October 6th, Matthew Wayne Shepard, a gay student of the University of Wyoming, was beaten, tortured, and left to die near Laramie, Wyoming. There is so much more to this period of 1998 to 2000 that I can now put into context. During the time I had started to live into a journey of racial reconciliation. Where's Jim? He reminded me to breathe at the session meeting the other night. Thank you. I started to live into a journey of racial reconciliation. As St. Paul Presbyterian in Houston was a multicultural church with about 20% of its members from West Africa. Transformative to me was how my African siblings embraced me as a white person, as one of their own, affirming me through love and compassion to grow in awareness of my own prejudice. This is important to me. We can grow awareness through affirmation, not through punishment or shame. Equally impactful was working with St. Paul's pastor, Lynn Johnson. Lynn Johnson. Lynn was a closeted gay man who lived with late-stage HIV and died because of a related disease on June 30th, 2005 at the age of 62. In Lynn, I experienced firsthand the love and support of an inner circle of congregants after he had spleen surgery, and it became known in a congregation at that time that he was living with HIV. Yet, I also experienced how harsh and hateful church can be, as at that time, the Presbyterian Church USA had not reached the point of full inclusion for LGBTQI+ people. And year after year, we went through that pain and struggle to be acknowledged as a people. I also encountered the harm of a small minority of people and the harm they can cause, as ultimately one person threatened to out Lynn as gay. That happened to so many men during that time. In fear of losing his health care, obviously that was important to him, living with HIV, and his benefits, Lynn stayed in a closet and resigned silently. If you can honor your coming out, like you write a book, I'm standing here for Lynn Johnson too. And actually I'm wearing his stole. Yet most impactful during this time was meeting my wife, Beth, falling in love with and marrying her on November 4th, 2000. She is the person who ultimately loved me into existence and into being. Why I could not fully realize that I was gay at that time in my life is actually now much easier to answer. And I will take you on that journey. And I hope you relate from your own life to touch points within mine. I grew up in apartheid South Africa with a destructive blend of white supremacy, Christian nationalism, and toxic masculinity. This dehumanizing combination of lethal ideology is, I think, most encapsulated by the Afrikaans word moffie, a homophobic slur that refers to a man who is perceived to be a little bit too feminine. Anyone who has grown up in South Africa knows the power of that word to hurt, says Eric Abraham, producer of the Afrikaans movie Moffie, which you can stream actually on one of the streaming services. He says, anyone who has grown up in South Africa knows the power of that word. It was the most demeaning, derogatory term you could come up with, used by white people to intimidate and deselect those who they feared infected their ideology. I mean, this is the way demonizing works. The word, he added, is equally vicious to straight or gay men, because it identifies you as an outsider, a man who does not embody the qualities of the strong, hyper-masculine dominator. As a side note, this mentality is still very much alive and well here in our beloved Texas. That is only one of 5 states in the United States that still has no promo homo laws in effect, which originated in 1991 and still states that homosexual conduct is not an acceptable lifestyle and is a criminal offense. This is our law. To further the agony, as did many of you, I grew up in a church that saw homosexuality as a sin. The stance of loving the sinner and hate the sin further created deep conflict within me. Confessing my very being Sunday after Sunday in worship was crippling. Maybe now you have a glimpse why to transform the confession of sin during worship is one of the most important aspects of worship, so we all can live more freely into who we are. These feelings of wrong behavior and self-hatred engulfed me in debilitating shame. It is therefore no surprise that my first emotional bond with a boy when I was in 6th grade was secret, deeply engulfed in guilt that expressed itself in shame. Living in a world hostile to homosexuality inhibits development for our children. And it creates contradictions and dissonance that demands repression. In fact, it seems almost surprising, even heroic, that anyone in this world would come at all, says Lauren A. Olson in his book, Finally Out, Letting Go of Living Straight. These contradictions gives rise to the feeling of the good me and the bad me, and are what psychologists and psychiatrists call cognitive dissonance. This experience is a sense of disagreement between who we know we are and who we think we should be. And the greater the difference, the greater the anxiety within us and the greater the self-hatred, which can lead to crippling shame. Kathy O'Neill, in her book, The Shame Machine, writes that this emotional journey with shame can actually be very much compared to the roller coaster stages of grief. The first stage of shame, we know it, it's hurt. It hurts when someone shames you for whatever the reason might be. Body shame, queer shame, your income level, your literary level, whatever that might be, we all know the hurt of shame. We can feel worthless, which leads then to cognitive dissonance, giving rise to the second stage of shame, denial. Now, sadly, O'Neill states that very few people get past these two stages. And unfortunately, these two stages is where we as a people can be most destructive, as there's so much tension within us, and we have to find ways to express ourselves and to relieve ourselves of this pain within us. And it can give rise to very destructive behavior. And even for me in a congregational context, to the pain we inflict on others. A lot of times comes from this place. And remember, very few of us can move past this. And I think very few churches can move past this point of the shame machine. It was during these first two stages of shame within the struggle of my sexuality that I would very much describe as a Gethsemane moment. I could resonate with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane as he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." I wanted my same-gender attraction to disappear. I wanted God to take it away for good. And so often wondered why I was cursed with such feelings, why I was cursed with this cup. Yet, this tomb of death and destruction later on in my life became my Lazarus moment. Hearing the voice of Jesus saying, Dries, you know the scripture of Lazarus? I shouldn't assume these things. Lazarus, on his way to Jerusalem, you're going to encounter Lazarus during Lent. On his way to Jerusalem, he's Jesus' good friend Lazarus died, and Jesus wept when Lazarus died. So Lazarus was dead for 4 days. Martha and Mary came and called Jesus and said, your good friend is dying. He got there 4 days too late, but then he called Lazarus out of that tomb of death. So Lazarus came out still wrapped in cloth, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But Jesus told Lazarus, come out. And for me, Jesus said, Dries, come out. It is here where an end turned into beginning. The very place of struggle ultimately became my resurrection moment as shame gave way to courage. O'Neill, in a book, says that those who have experienced shame personally understand its power and are perhaps in the best position to harness it for good. As I so intensely prayed for this cup to be removed from me, I was blinded in that struggle. You know, to keep yourself in a place of shame is tremendous hard work. It takes so much energy. It's hard work. And I was so intensely involved in that struggle to keep me in shame that I missed Jesus' commandment to his disciples. And what did he say? Stay awake. Jesus commanded them to stay awake. Father Richard Rohr says that staying awake comes not from willpower, but from a wholehearted surrender to this moment as it is. It is largely a matter of letting go of resistance to what this moment offers. It is an acceptance of the full reality of what is here in this place right now. He continues to say that to stay awake is the task of one's lifetime. Within this context of shame, and this is fascinating to me, O'Neill identifies this place of awakening and the third phase as acceptance. And Father Rohr just mentioned acceptance as well as a state of spiritual rebirth. Acceptance neutralizes shame, she says, and this to me as a Christian is actually the point of rebirth. Now finally, after decades and struggle, I can stand here in front of you and say, I'm gay. So what? Now finally, I can start shedding the shame and the constricting web of lies, secrecy, and self-hatred that kept me in denial but almost killed me. Side note, this now is not a moment in time. As Father Rohr said, it's an ongoing process. As a process that for me started 7 years ago, and I'm still working at it. This is also a very, very fragile stage. And this is why I'm so grateful for you as a congregation. Because if shamed now, you can very well fall back to previous stages of shame. This acceptance is the serenity I long for in my life. This is the wholeness of Psalm 139 that says, O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. These words of you are acquainted, when you live in secrecy, you are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me becomes night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as day, for darkness is as light to you. It is this acceptance then that leads to transcendence. Transcendence is the fourth stage of shame. As we now turn outwards, finally, you can turn outwards and take action to dismantle shame. And this is the beauty here. Finally, you reach the point that the very systems that inflicted shame on you, you now have the power and the ability to turn that very shame back on them. Transcendence enables us to take on the very system that caused us to be crippled, but whatever the source of shame might be. This then, I hope you see, is my passion for social justice. I cannot leave social justice outside this door because this is who I am. And this is where I see myself grow, because I would love to tell our legislature that the time has come to do away with so-called no-promo homo laws. The time has come not to shame our trans families into living in secrecy in Texas and to criminalize them. And the time has come for us as communities of faith to stand up in one voice to say, no longer. Family values is important, and what you are doing is not in congruency with family values in the way we read the Bible. So let's face it. It is not so much today about me being gay as it is about all of us being human. This is not about me as an individual, but it is about us as a community. This is not about my ministry, but about what it means to be Christian and to follow in the ways of Jesus of Nazareth. This past week, Beth and I have been overcome with your love and support, and we know we are being carried in prayer. Yet, if there's one aspect of our ministry together, and I mean all of us here, that has echoed through all the messages we have received, it is the sense of community we have cultivated together. Belonging, you see, is essential. We all want to belong for who and what we are. We all need a brave, safe space like University Presbyterian Church where we can be vulnerable, where we can be authentic, spaces in which we can share our struggles, our fears, and our failures without fear of judgment or rejection. Reflection then further on the Lazarus story. It was Jesus who said, "Come out." Remember? Jesus said, "Come out." Yet Lazarus was still wrapped in cloths of death. And it became the task of the community to unbind him and continue the ongoing work of resurrection. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." That is what you did for me this past week. While it was God, I believe, who said, "Dries, come out," calling me to new life. You, the session, our session, and you this past week were the ones who unbound the cloths of self-hatred, of secrecy, and of shame. And for that, I'm so forever grateful. While this is not a one-time event, but an ongoing journey, the invitation before us today is to untangle ourselves and others from that which constricts us and keeps us from realizing and living into our true identity as God-bearers. So therefore, dear siblings, let us grow in vulnerability and in generosity of judgment, extending grace to ourselves and to others, as together we seek the fullness of God's love and grace for ourselves, for this congregation, and the communities we live in. Amen. Thanks be to God. Thank you.